You think you know the story of Hercules. You know the songs, the animated movies, the image of a smiling, muscle-bound hero who fought monsters, saved the innocent, and earned his place on Mount Olympus. He is the original superhero, the blueprint for every champion who followed, a story of going from zero to hero. That story is a lie. It is a careful, deliberate, and millennia-long sanitization of a tale so dark, so steeped in psychological horror and unforgivable crime, that its original tellers could barely speak of it directly. Once you understand the world that created him and the crime that defines him, you will see the truth. The 12 labors were not a quest for glory. They were a death sentence. The monsters he fought were not the true villains of his story, and the name Hercules, or more accurately, Heracles, was never meant to be a symbol of heroism. It was meant to be a mark of shame, because the real story of Heracles is not about a man who saved the world. It's about a man who destroyed his own. It is not a myth about redemption. It is the anatomy of a murder. To find the truth, we must first confront the event that modern storytellers either hide, downplay, or erase completely. The single act that precipitates everything that follows. It is the murder of his wife, Megara, and their children. Forget the sanitized versions where a villain like Hades holds her soul hostage. The original crime is far more intimate and therefore far more horrific. In the most enduring and classical accounts, particularly as dramatized by the playwright Euripides around 416 BCE, there is no external villain. There is only Heracles. Picture the scene not as a cartoon, but as a real, terrifying moment in a Bronze Age home. Heracles, the great hero, celebrated protector of Thebes, returns home. He is with his wife, Megara, and their children. Sources vary, but typically list 3 sons. In Euripides' telling, he has just returned from a heroic exploit, saving his family from a tyrannical usurper. The home is safe. The danger is past. It is a moment for celebration. And then something snaps. The goddess Hera, who has hated Heracles since his conception as a bastard son of Zeus, sends Lysa, the very spirit of mad frenzy, of rabid rage, to infect the hero's mind. But this is not a simple case of possession. Euripides is careful to show us a psychological breakdown. Heracles' eyes roll back. Foam flecks his lips. He begins to see things that are not there. He sees his own children and believes they are the children of his enemy, King Eurystheus. He sees his own home as an enemy palace. His wife, Megara, screams. She tries to reason with him to bring him back. She cries out, "Beloved, what are you doing? These are your sons you are killing." But the man she loves is gone, replaced by a monster. He knocks an arrow to his famous bow. The first child falls. He grabs another, using his legendary club, the very tool of his heroism, to smash the boy's skull against a stone pillar. The third child tries to hide, but there is no escape. And then he turns on Megara. He kills her too. The house falls silent, filled with the smoke of the hearth and the smell of blood. The great hero stands amidst the shattered bodies of his own family, slain by his own hand. This is the real beginning of the story, not a quest for adventure, but the horrifying aftermath of a domestic massacre. Everything that follows, the famous 12 labors, is a direct consequence of this act. You have to understand the context here. In ancient Greece, murder, especially the murder of one's own kin, was the most profound of all pollutions. It created a state known as miasma. This was not just a feeling of guilt. It was a tangible, infectious stain that clung to the killer. A person afflicted with miasma was a walking blight upon the land. Their presence could cause crops to fail, livestock to sicken, and plagues to spread. They were untouchable, a source of cosmic contagion. So, When Heracles awakens from his madness, covered in the blood of his family, he is not a fallen hero who can just say, he is sorry. He is a pariah. He is the most polluted man in all of Greece. He is exiled, shunned, and feared. He seeks purification at the Oracle of Delphi, the most sacred site in the Hellenic world. And what does the oracle tell him? It does not offer him forgiveness. It sentences him. He is to serve his cousin, the man he despises, King Eurystheus of Tiryns, for 12 years. He must perform whatever 10 labours the king demands. Later, traditions would expand this to 12. This is where the second great lie of the Heracles myth takes root. We view these labours as heroic adventures, a checklist of epic feats. Slay the Nemean lion, kill the Lernaean hydra, capture the golden hind. We see them as opportunities for glory. This is a fundamental misreading of the ancient mindset. These were not opportunities, they were punishments. They were a series of state-sanctioned, suicidal missions designed for one purpose: to kill the polluted murderer that society no longer knew what to do with. King Eurystheus is not a wise ruler testing a hero's mettle. He is a terrified man given dominion over the most dangerous person alive. He is an executioner using monsters as his axe. Each labor is designed to be impossible. Each task is a death sentence. Let's deconstruct the very first labor. Slay the Nemean lion. This isn't just a big cat. Its hide is impenetrable, impervious to any weapon made by man. No sword, spear, or arrow can pierce it. Sending a man to fight it is like sending him to stop a tidal wave with a bucket. Eurystheus's logic is simple. The lion will tear Heracles to pieces, and the problem of the filicidal maniac will be solved. When Heracles, through sheer brute force and desperation, corners the beast in its cave and strangles it to death, he doesn't return to a hero's welcome. He returns as a failure of the system. He was supposed to die. When he appears before Eurystheus, wearing the lion's impenetrable hide as armor, the king is not impressed. He is horrified. He is so terrified of this unstoppable, blood-stained man that he has a large bronze jar built and buried in the earth so he can hide in it whenever Heracles approaches the city. This is not the dynamic between a king and his champion. This is the dynamic between a warden and his death row inmate who keeps surviving his own execution. Consider the second labor: kill the Lernaean hydra. This is even more pointedly a suicide mission. The hydra is a multi-headed serpent that lives in a toxic swamp. Its very breath and blood are poison, and for every head you cut off, 2 more grow in its place. It is a creature that literally becomes stronger from its own wounds. What is this, if not a perfect metaphor for trauma? A monster that multiplies with every attempt to destroy it. Sending Heracles to fight this thing is not a test of strength. It is a sentence to be poisoned, torn apart, and overwhelmed. The task is, by definition, impossible to complete alone. He only succeeds because his nephew, Iolaus, helps him by cauterizing the necks of the stumps with a torch, preventing them from regrowing. And what is his reward for succeeding at this impossible task? Eurystheus declares that the labor doesn't count. Why? Because he had help. This is not the ruling of a fair judge. It is the desperate scrambling of an executioner whose weapon has failed. He is changing the rules to keep the sentence going. He needs Heracles to die. This pattern repeats. Each labor is a carefully chosen instrument of death. Capture the Erymanthian boar, a creature of such destructive force it was ravaging the countryside. Clean the Augean stables in a single day, a task not just physically impossible, but designed for maximum humiliation, forcing the great hero to wallow in filth. Drive away the Stymphalian birds, monstrous creatures with bronze beaks and metallic feathers they could fire like arrows. These are not heroic quests. They are a systematic attempt by society to dispose of a man it cannot forgive and is too terrified to execute directly. The labours are a form of ritualised, outsourced capital punishment. So where did the madness come from? The easy answer, the one the myth provides, is Hera. A jealous goddess zapped him with a curse. It absolves him of responsibility. He wasn't himself. But the Greeks were more psychologically astute than we give them credit for. They used gods and goddesses to explain powerful, often terrifying, internal human forces. Ares was not just a god of war, he was the spirit of bloodlust on the battlefield. Aphrodite was not just a goddess of love, she was the overwhelming force of desire that could topple cities. And Hera's curse, Lysa's frenzy. This is very likely a mythological framework for a recognizable human condition. Consider Hercules. He is a man whose entire existence is defined by extreme violence. He is the greatest warrior in a warrior society. He lives in a state of constant combat. What we are seeing in his fit of madness is not divine intervention. It is a catastrophic psychological break. It is the ancient world's attempt to name post-traumatic stress disorder. Imagine a Bronze Age soldier, a man who has known nothing but killing since he was old enough to hold a spear. He has seen horrors we can barely imagine. He returns home from the battlefield, but the battlefield never truly leaves him. The lines blur. The survival instincts that kept him alive in combat, hyper-vigilance, explosive aggression, the dehumanization of the enemy, do not simply switch off when he enters his home. In a moment of stress or confusion, the warrior brain takes over. A crying child is no longer a child, it is a threat. A wife trying to calm him is an obstacle. The home becomes a battleground. The family becomes the enemy. The story of Hercules' madness is not an excuse. It is an explanation. It is a culture grappling with the terrifying reality that the very men they train to be protectors can, in an instant, become the most dangerous monsters of all. The myth of Hera's curse is a way to create an external cause for an internal horror that is too difficult to confront. That their greatest hero was mentally broken by the very violence they celebrated. This brings us to the sanitization. How did this grim tale of a traumatized, filicidal outcast become a heroic children's story? The process was long and gradual, driven by the changing needs of culture. The Romans were the first great agents of this change. When they adopted the Greek pantheon, they took Heracles and Latinized his name to Hercules. But they also altered his character. The Roman Empire needed symbols of strength, order, and stoic virtue. A mentally unstable family killer did not fit the bill. Roman writers like Ovid and Seneca began to reframe the story. The madness was still there, but the emphasis shifted. It became less about the horror of the crime and more about the hero's immense suffering and his stoic endurance of the punishment. The labours were transformed from a death sentence into a philosophical exercise in fortitude. Hercules became a model for the Roman ideal of virtus, manly excellence, courage, and duty in the face of terrible fate. The inconvenient, bloody details of the murders were softened, the psychological collapse replaced with a more noble, tragic flaw. Centuries later, during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, this Roman version was the one that European artists and writers rediscovered. Hercules was now a classical allegory for man's triumph over base instincts, a symbol of rational power overcoming chaotic nature. The monsters he fought were no longer stand-ins for his own inner demons. They were simply external obstacles to be overcome. By the time we get to the Victorian era, the sanitization is almost complete. Classicists, writing for a society obsessed with moral propriety and muscular Christianity, presented Hercules as a straightforward champion of good. He was a civilizing force, a bringer of order to a savage world. The murder of his family, if mentioned at all, was treated as a tragic but ultimately motivating backstory, the catalyst for his heroic journey. Much like the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents, it was no longer the defining horror of his existence. And then came the 20th century and the final agent of sanitization, Disney. In the 1997 animated film, the transformation is absolute. The crime at the heart of the myth is not just downplayed, it is completely erased. Megara is not his wife and the mother of his murdered children. She is Meg, a cynical, wise-cracking love interest who he saves. The children do not exist. Hera is not a vengeful tormentor, but a loving mother. The madness is gone, the miasma is gone, the labours are reduced to a training montage. The entire point of the original myth, a terrifying exploration of violence, trauma, and the social consequences of an unforgivable act, is inverted. A story about a man's descent into monstrousness becomes a story about a god's journey to humanity. The darkest and most complex of the Greek heroes is rendered into the simplest and most wholesome. He becomes a brand, a lovable, marketable hero for children. But the original story endures beneath the layers of Roman philosophy and Victorian morality and corporate gloss. It endures because it tells a truth that is deeply uncomfortable. The myth of Hercules is not a celebration of strength, it is a profound warning about it. It asks a question that we still struggle with today. What is the cost of creating a perfect warrior? What happens to a man when his only tool is a hammer and he is taught that every problem is a nail? What happens when he brings the brutality of the battlefield into the sanctuary of his own home? The Greeks did not have a name for PTSD, but they saw its effects. They saw the darkness that could consume the minds of their strongest men. They created the story of Hercules not to inspire children, but to caution adults. They created it to house a terrifying truth about the human psyche. He is not a hero to be emulated, he is a tragedy to be mourned. A walking catastrophe, so drenched in the blood of his own family that his path must be one of solitude and death. The monsters he is sent to kill are, in a way, a mercy. They are a reflection of the monster he believes he has become in fighting them. He is fighting himself. Every labour is a form of self-destruction. In the swamps of Lerna, he battles a creature whose poison is in his own veins. When he descends into the underworld to capture Cerberus, he is not just a hero on a quest. He is a dead man walking, entering the realm where he belongs, among the shades of those he has killed. The story we have been told is a comfortable fiction. It allows us to admire the strength without acknowledging the horror it can unleash. It allows us to celebrate the hero without looking at his victims. But the original myth denies us this comfort. It forces us to look. It forces us to stand in the silence of that blood-soaked home in Thebes, to see the bodies of Megara and her children, and to understand that the monster who did this was also the greatest hero of his age. Hercules is not the story of zero to hero. It is the story of a hero who becomes a zero, a man reduced to nothing by his own hand, a walking pollution who spends the rest of his life trying to outrun the ghosts of his own children. He is the dark shadow that follows every warrior home from the war. The story of Hercules was never about a man becoming a god. It was about a monster created by a society that worshipped violence, desperately and tragically failing to become a man.